Hi, I'm Phyllis Levitt, and I'm back to read the first chapter of A Light in the Darkness. And what I would like you to know is that the first many chapters of the book are all autobiographical, and they kind of chart the course of my life and the patterns I was living out before divine guidance really made itself known to me in 1994. But what I'm hoping you'll see is that along the way, there were bursts of light along the way of my life that were kind of mile markers about what I could have expected, had I known, might emerge later on in my life. And I'm wondering if you might see the same thing in your life looking back, that there really were indications of where you needed to go or what was guiding you along the way. So while your story may be very, very different from mine, I'm hoping you'll see what relates to you in your own life about the emergence of a consciousness or a knowing or a direction or a sense of guidance that might have been there or might be there now that you could begin to distinguish. So this is chapter 1. It's called The Fall, Part 1. I'm in my bed, or I was just a minute ago, but not anymore. I'm floating up on the ceiling of my bedroom. I love it up here. The little girl who is me is under the covers in her flannel pajamas, but I can't see her. It's too dark. I love it up here. I don't want to come down, but sometimes as soon as I have that thought, I'm back inside her in my bed, and I feel sad. That might be where I start my story. I've never actually found the beginning, so this will have to do. You might be wondering what I was doing up on the ceiling. What would drive a little girl out of her body in the night? I never wondered at all. There was no wondering back then. Things just were the way they were. I guess my family looked good, and I'm not saying there wasn't a lot of good. I think we looked like a normal family in a normal house on a normal street. And perhaps we were, perhaps, but I'm going to tell you the way I remember it. I don't want you to think it was all bad, because it wasn't. We had Friday night Sabbath in the dining room with candles and roast beef and potato kugel. We all said the Sabbath prayer in Hebrew. Never mind that we had no idea what we were saying. We had pajamas warming on the radiator after a bath, and the lavender smell of Yardley's on my father's shaving brush in the early mornings. We went to the ocean every summer and ate lobster and ice cream, gathered starfish and crabs. We went to museums and the library and Broadway plays. We bought our clothes in department stores, and our front yard was always mowed in the summer. And we had a big wooden workbench in the basement where my older brother drew long-legged birds that fit into each other like Escher paintings, where he taught me and my sister block printing and silk screen making and copper enameling. But there were signs, too, that all was not right. At least all was not right with me. I'm playing school in the den. I take out a black and white composition book from the shelf in the corner. I start out practicing my ABCs and drawing the same little house with yellow curtains in the windows. But I'm not practicing my ABCs now. I'm not doing math either. I'm drawing someone who hurts little girls. Just the face and a little bit of what they did. I can feel the hurt when I draw it. I don't know why I do it. I know there is something all wrong about drawing these pictures and that I don't want anyone to see them, but I have to draw them anyway. I close the book and hide it under the crayons and the colored pencils. She never drew the whole thing. She didn't know what the whole thing was. All I know is that she was waking up at night with those images of someone hurting a little girl long before she drew them. I don't think she even knew the little girl was her. In fact, I know she didn't. So I think there were signs. It's hard to imagine in all the years we played in that den that no one ever saw those pictures and wondered what the hell I was doing. I was afraid of the dark by the time I was 2 or 3. If the light is on, you can see the spiders before they get you. I could not go to sleep if the hall light wasn't on, and the entire bedroom had to be checked for spiders. I watched the light slide across the cold wooden floor, waiting for the slightest shadow of hairy legs. If there was a spider, my father had to take it away. I spent an entire summer at Girl Scout camp refusing to sit on the log to eat lunch with the other children, just to be sure a spider wouldn't find me. You see, you obsess about spiders because there's a possibility of keeping spiders from crawling on your skin. Whereas your skin itself, well, that's a whole other can of worms. There's no hall light that can protect you from a feeling of burning, crawling flesh when there's no fire visible. There are no words to scream because there's no understanding in the mind and no throat that could open anyway to call for help. Tell me, how do you get out of your own skin if that's where all the terror congregates? Well, I'll tell you, you don't. You don't get out of your skin. So you go away. You find every way imaginable for a human being to go away from her own skin. You hate sweating because it reminds you, so you make sure not to do anything that makes you sweat. You suck in your stomach, suck in your breath, and suck in your eyes until they roll back into that smoking black oven in your own head, with only just enough vision turned outward to steer you down the steps or across the playground. Then you crawl somewhere either further inside, where there's no skin, no sweat, and no little girl. Nobody sees a thing. Not one bit of you colors itself outside that tightly drawn line, and not one bit of you comes out of that hiding place where spiders crawl on you anyway. So you see, there was this odd juxtaposition of realities long before anyone talked about things like reality or the psyche or extrasensory perception, at least in my neck of the woods back in the 50s and early 60s. There was the reality we all acknowledged, the one you could see like the big oak tree in the front yard, the overstuffed armchair my father sat in to listen to his classical music, and the little white porcelain shoe dotted with pink and green flowers on the knick-knack shelf. There were neighbor kids we played jump rope and hopscotch with, the Catholic Martins who had a huge Christmas tree every year and bowls full of ribbon candy you could take without asking. And there were the stunning red-green iris tips that poked their little heads up along the driveway every spring of every year, even before the winter air was gone. And then there was the other reality that was not seen, but only swallowed, like time-released poison in your innocent little grape soda. That shadow world where someone hurts you in a basement, where horror explodes out of the dark and scorches your very little girl body, and then retreats without a trace into the night, where it can jump out on spider legs and get you when the lights go out. Juggling all that becomes a way of life, as automatic as breathing, as second nature as tying your shoes. You become accustomed to the sound of nails scraping across a chalkboard, while the rest of the world seems to be hearing music. And so you do your best to act as if you're hearing music too. But don't misunderstand me. It's not like all that juggling works. You don't hear music. You just go mute. You go numb. You wade your way through sleepovers and birthday parties like a loon in an oil slick. The older you get, the more complex it becomes. There's an outside you and an inside you. You hide the inside you. You stuff her back in, and you stuff her back in because she just doesn't belong. And you know, without knowing anything, that there is something very wrong with her. And so despite the bubble baths and despite blowing out the Hanukkah candles with their beautiful colored wax dripping down the stem of the menorah just before bed, the little girl that was me lay under the covers sleepless and saw herself buried alive in a coffin, imagining herself in the bottomless black nothingness of death. Or she lay there in terror of the house burning down, she up there on the second floor agonizing that there was no ladder outside her window, because what if? While her parents watched television and ate mocha chip ice cream in the den downstairs. Those were the silent cries. That was the wilderness I lived in for as long as I can remember. The fall from grace was as soundless as spider footsteps. But not all the cries were silent. There were many that were long and loud, some in the daytime and some in the middle of the night. They let her cry it out in the daytime. I can't imagine what she did that was so bad, but I hear my mother downstairs letting my father know exactly how upset she is with me. She shrieks in her, "I can't take it anymore. It's your fault, Jay," half helpless, half accusing voice. She's calling me a witch. At night, I imagine my cries made it impossible for them to sleep, and so eventually I would hear my father's footsteps on the stairs. To this day, I have not one memory of him entering my room. So you see, there were two realities, one outside and one inside. The outside you is always on the lookout. It has to make sure the inside you never shows. And so, in a way, you are always outside yourself. But of course, you don't know that either. You don't know anything. You just try to be good and get all your homework done. So let me just say this. If it isn't exactly clear what happened, that's because it wasn't. You know a heck of a lot more than I ever knew back then, because I knew nothing.